በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Good afternoon. So welcome. I think we are full house. We have, I can see we have Bekal, Kirubel, Lemayu. I think there are just two more who are not there, but we'll just continue. Because the class is being recorded. We'll share with them later. Today I want us to look at the practice of good corporate governance. And next week, after this class, I want to share the other lecture slides. And next week, then we need to discuss, Friday next week, we need to spend time and discuss all the case studies that I've told you to read, right? So I guess what this lecture is all about is just helping us understand how do organizations go about implementing and putting in place good corporate governance practices, right? Remember in our first lecture, we had tried to explain that corporate governance is about having structures in place, is about having procedures in place that institutions follow to enable accountability and ethical practices, right? And the concern is that many organizations, and we saw from our examples globally and cases in Kenya that have fallen because of poor corporate governance. And that is why I included the case studies in the lecture notes that I gave you. There are actually 10 of them. Case studies 1 up to case study 10, global institutions, examples coming from all over parts of the world, just for you as students to be able to see how certain organizations struggled with putting up structures or challenges in corporate governance that then made to the organizations to fall down. So that's very critical. That's basically what this afternoon I want us to look at. Now that I think on Friday next week, I'll just try to get your feedback on the other lectures. And please try to make sure you're up to date in terms of reading the lecture materials and the case studies, because that will form the major part of my discussion next week. So basically that's important, and that's what this slide says. It says corporate governance is concerned with the establishment of an appropriate legal, economic, and institutional environment that would facilitate and allow business enterprises to grow and thrive. You see, when discussing with you last class, it emerged that corporate governance is something new in Ethiopia, right? Remember, I even shared with you a draft corporate governance from Ethiopia, which has not been fully implemented, but it is still at a draft level. And what is emerging is that because of state control, then you find that the government comes in in the event that there are any issues with an organization. But again, as organizations are going towards being led to run on their own, then corporate governance is becoming very crucial for both private and public organizations, right? So again, we are saying it is the responsibilities of the owners of the corporation to elect competent directors, you know. So if you have an organization, you must ensure, or a company, you must ensure that you have the right directors. And that's basically what we want to look at today. Maybe find out what are some of the responsibilities of the directors, how do you choose the directors, what are some of the qualifications they have, and what is their job within the organization, right? So there's need to elect competent directors and to ensure that they govern the corporation in a manner that is consistent with their stewardship, right? So this is very crucial. That good. So I'll just continue. We'll share these slides. Already you have them. So as I said, the owners of the company, it's their responsibility to ensure that you choose the right directors, yes, and make sure that your directors are people who are buying into the vision. They're buying into the aspiration of your company. You know, there's no need to have somebody in your company who does not share the same vision with you. So I think that is something that I wanted to make very clear. That's why we are saying it is the responsibility. It is the responsibility of the owners of the corporation to elect competent directors and to ensure that they govern the corporation in a manner consistent with their stewardship, right? So the people we are electing as directors, we are saying that people who should be able to buy into our vision, right? To buy into the vision of the company, right? So that you are not just coming up with people who have a different way of doing things and may not fit well into your organization. Now, some of the tools of corporate governance that we are going to look at are, number one-to-one meetings. There's need to have meetings as frequently as possible. Number two, voting, right? When you have to vote in the directors, there's need to ensure that the voting is done in the right way, right? Shareholder proposals and resolutions, right? During the AGMs, the shareholders make propositions. So let me admit again, Bekal, I think there's a problem with internet. Welcome back, Biru and Alemayu. I think there's an internet issue, but don't worry, we are recording. The class is being recorded. The slides will be shared. The notes are there. So, but what I'm missing is your contribution. So I don't know for today. Let me just try to see if I can have the lecture. Yeah, but on Friday, next Friday, I'll really want now contribution on these last two slides that we have shared, plus the case studies. Right. So corporate governance rating systems is also critical, and there's what we call the focus list. Now, these are tools that we'll discuss, and I think if you look at my lecture notes, you'll find that I've discussed them in a lot of details, right? Let's just look at some of them, some of these tools which we are able to look at. For example, a good corporate governance rating system. So if you had to develop a tool for checking your company, where you work, for example, right now, Biru, Bekal, or Ayele, if we were to look at the corporate governance system in your organization, will it pass the following tests? Yeah, we are looking at the rating, and we'll consider number one, how transparent are accounting and reporting practices generally in the country, right? are there existing corporate governance practices in place? So if you could answer these questions based on your organization, on the company that you're working right now, do you have a code of best practice? To what extent is the code complied with? What sanctions are there against companies which do not comply? So in essence, what we're just trying to say, if you look at this from a countrywide perspective, from Ethiopian perspective, you will be asking yourself, number one, how transparent are accounting and reporting practices in general? But you can also look at this with regard to the company where you are employed, or if you have your own company, and you're trying to ask yourself, how transparent are the accounting and reporting practices in that particular maybe organization or company where you're employed, right? And you ask yourself, are there existing corporate governance practices in place? Do you really have them? Are they there, right? I think in our last class, Ayele just gave us an example of having tried to put up a corporate governance handbook for some organization. So ask yourself, do these exist? Do you have a code of best practices? Is it complied with? So what happens? What happens to those companies that do not comply? Is there any punishment? What happens exactly? So I think it's important that you ask yourself these questions, and these questions will help you see how you can rate your corporate governance system, right? Either as a country or in the organization where you are employed. So I think now I want now to focus on the drivers of corporate governance. So just trying to see the drivers of corporate governance, how it developed and to where we are so far. So you can see what you're saying here is that corporate governance issues came to prominence in the USA during the 1970s. So this is where the beginning of corporate governance started. The 1970s in the UK and Europe. It came in the late 80s. So a lot of the principles of corporate governance that we are studying today started from the US in the 1970s, right? And in Europe in the 1980s, you see? So that's that has been the development. Just like when we were doing leadership, we also say that a lot of our studies in leadership also started in the US, mostly after the Second World War. So here again, you can see most of the corporate governance principles and its development that we are trying to study in this class have their origins in the US, in the companies that were established in the US. So in the periods of around 1970s, and then in UK and in the Europe, it came up in around 1980s, right? And we are saying that the main drivers associated with increasing for the development of corporate demands were follows. So what are some of the reasons why there has been an increase in interest on corporate governance? Why do you think there has been this big increase, right? For example, in most other countries, in Kenya, I think in the 1990s is when it became a subject of interest. I think in Ethiopia, Ailemari was telling us it's also becoming important, you know. So what are some of the reasons that made this critical? So you can see one of the big reasons why the study of corporate governance has become critical are the scandals, you know. There's been a lot of scandals going on. For example, company directors defrauding the company of money, you know. I gave you examples of, you can see case number 10 in the lecture materials that I gave you for Barings Bank. There's a bank called Barings in the UK. And even in Kenya, maybe later when we are able to have a one-on-one discussion, we'll maybe include cases of some banks like Trade Bank Imperial Bank, there are so many where, as a result of poor corporate governance structures, the directors ended up defrauding the company of billions of dollars. So it's because of these scandals that there has been an effort to ensure that organizations are streamlined, to ensure that corporate governance issues are streamlined in the right way. Number two, why there's been an interest in corporate governance is increasing internationalization and globalization. You no longer can, the world has become like a global village. There is interconnectedness, and it's difficult to stay alone. It's difficult to be on your own as a country. So countries need to interconnect, and that is why the aspect of internationalization and globalization is one of the drivers of corporate governance. Now, the third one is investor concerns. I've already alluded to the fact that in our last lecture, that most investors, before they put the money in your company or in your organization, they want to know whether you have the right structures in place so that their money is secured and so that they are confident that things will be done in the right way, So that's one of the more reasons why they've been interested to ensure that you have the right corporate governance structures. Another one is the quality of accounts. We have just said that you need to adhere to the right standards of accounting and reporting, accounting practice and reporting of the accounting of your records, So the quality of the account is also high when we have the right principles. And of course, the other issue is as a result of national differences. I think this is differences. There's an R here. It's not differences, national differences. So that with good corporate governance practices, then it's the harmony, just like in point number 2, we talk about internationalization and globalization. So if you are practicing, let's say, the right standards of accounting procedures, which is recognized globally, then you see you are able to communicate in terms of your organization's profitability or whatever in the right way. So I think it's important to look at this slide again because this slide tries to explain to us what exactly is driving the study of corporate governance. Why is it? You can see, as I said, most of it started in the US. We are given the US in the 70s. And again, I've indicated that from the US, then we also have the UK in the 80s. And I've given an example that the Kenyan situation has been possibly in the 90s is where a lot of this concern for corporate governance came about. Now, I think I'll say if you have a question, Abiru, Alemayu, and Kirubel, just write it on the chat. If you have a question, just post it on the chat, and then I can answer in the chat, or I can see how to answer. Please just post it on the chat. Whoever has a question, so that yes. So I think the next thing for us to look at, so those are some of the drivers which I've indicated. Now, so let's look at some of the principles of good corporate governance, just trying to go through them very slowly. I hope even if your internet is weak, you are able to follow me by looking at the slides, right? So the following are some of the principles developed from a number of reports from many jurisdictions across the world. Indeed, when I was looking at the draft corporate governance for the Ethiopia, I saw it actually relates to this, you know. There's no difference with what you're discussing here. So number one, ensure adherence and satisfaction of the strategic objectives of the organization. That's aiding effective management, you know. So one of the things about corporate governance, we are saying, is that it ensures that there is adherence and satisfaction to the strategic objectives, right? So there is a need to ensure that good corporate governance principles is aligned to the strategic objectives of the organization, right? I think these are issues that maybe, let me just tell right here. So raise question, raise comment. So check on the chat, say comment, comment, or raise questions. Questions here. So please you use the chat forum to either comment or ask questions. Ask questions or comment on the chat forum, and I'll be able to answer you. So number two, the second principle of corporate governance, and I think there are many, I want to go through them slowly, is to convey and reinforce the requirements related to governance, right? In local, state, and then listing rules. So it has to convey and reinforce the requirements that relates to governance, right? So I think that's also an additional principle that you need to know. Now, the other principle is that good corporate governance assists companies in minimizing risks, you know. So how does it do that? I think that's the question we should be asking. We should be asking ourselves, how does the principles of good corporate governance assist companies in minimizing risks, right? And we are saying especially financial, legal, and reputational risks, you know, so that there are no issues of maybe directors have stolen money, or issues of the CEO has embezzled funds. You know, if the structures are very clear, the accounting practices are very clear, the accounts are reported to the shareholders, and there's a good scrutiny of what's happening, then you can see that you're actually shielding the company from such risks, yeah, financial, either money being squandered or stolen, the legal issues where you have done things against the law, maybe you're being taken to court, or you have, as a result of any of this, you have destroyed your reputation. And when you destroy your reputation as an organization, you see that then has a negative impact to your business, you know, especially if you're an organization that sells commodities, you're selling a product or a service. And if you have a reputational risk, then that means that most of your clients, people will keep away from you unless you are a monopoly. Yeah. So these are some reasons, really. So by ensuring appropriate system of financial control for monitoring and ensuring compliance with the law are in place. I think this is very, very critical, that there is need for compliance with the law, right? So you've realized, I think, from some of the cases that I gave you to study, you've been realizing that if you don't have good corporate governance principles in place, then that is where we end up with all these risks I've talked about: financial, legal, reputation. So you really need to preserve all these as a company, right? So that's why I said we need really then to look at it. I said, maybe look at this, some of these questions I asked earlier, either as an individual or if you have your own company, or as what is that? Yes, these are the questions I asked. So we really need to look at this. How transparent are accounting and reporting practices in your country, right? Or in your company, or in your organization? Are there existing corporate governance practices in place? Are they there or they are not there? So if they're not there, then that's an indication that things are not okay. Do you have a code of best practice? You really have to look at that also. To what extent is the code being practiced or complied with? And then we should ask ourselves, what happens when it is not complied with, right? So I think that's very important. You should go back to this slide number 5 and then just try to ask yourself those questions, because these questions will be very critical in you assessing whether you have the right corporate governance principles in place within your organization, right? So I think I was at the point of looking at the principles. So we looked at, I think I've looked at this, satisfaction and assurance. Then I've looked at that, minimizing risks. And then the next one I want to look at is this. So the fourth one is to promote ethical behavior with integrity, you know, meaning straightforward dealing and completeness being particularly important. You know, if you don't have structures in place, then it's very easy for the director, the general manager, or the directors to abuse their offices. You know, people abuse their offices by involving, you have heard of abuse of office, you know, it's because you are not adhering to the law. So corporate governance is important to ensure that the top management adheres to ethics and integrity. Now, this one is also important, investor confidence, right? Remember, I've said that should a foreign company want to invest in your organization, then they're interested in ensuring that their money is safe, their investment is safe. And one thing they will request is whether you have a corporate governance structure in place. Because with a corporate governance structure in place, then they will know that their risk elements are low. They'll know that there is integrity. They'll know that there are ethical behaviors and things like that. The other principle is full responsibilities to all stakeholders and to minimize potential conflicts of interest. Again, this is very important. In one of our lectures, I don't know whether, if you look at the lecture notes I've given you, at some stage, we'll talk about shareholders and stakeholders and try to define what's the difference between the two. But ideally, a shareholder is somebody, a stakeholder is somebody who has an interest in that company in whichever way. So even an employee, you as an employee of the company you're working for, you are a stakeholder, you know, because you have interest to know who is the general manager, who is the finance director, how are they handling their job, who are the members of the board of directors, you know. So you are a stakeholder. The customer is also a stakeholder, you know, because the customer is also interested. Whoever has a shares, maybe has bought shares in that company, is also a stakeholder. So stakeholder is much wider. And basically all these people are interested to ensure that things are running smooth and there is minimum conflict of interest. You know, conflict of interest comes about where we have a situation where maybe you are the finance director or you are the director of supply chain or procurement, whichever name you're giving it, or you sit on the board, and possibly then you have your own side company. So you are presenting your company maybe to tender for some work that is being advertised, for some maybe services, maybe some consultancy services, and you are in the management position in that company. That's basically what we call conflict of interest, and a lot of it has been seen in some of those companies that I've gave you to study as case studies, and even those that I listed in Kenya that have had problems, where you find maybe directors or even the GM or the head of finance have their own companies, and they're using those companies to secure jobs within the organization, maybe some tenders to supply some things. Basically, that is considered conflict of interest. And good corporate governance principles does not allow that to happen. So it means if you have the right principles in place, then we are saying that that is not going to be allowed to happen. So it will protect the company from such. It also establishes clear accountability at senior levels within an organization. This is a kind of accountability I'm talking about at senior levels, so that you know what is right and what is wrong, what should be done and what should not be done. Now, those are very critical things, and sometimes when they're not properly observed, then it leads to problems within the organization. Now, the other principle is maintain the independence of those who scrutinize the behavior of the organization and its senior executive managers. So as a good principle, I think, for example, when you're dealing with auditors, right, it's very important that the auditors are very independent, so that when they're scrutinizing the organization, they report, their report is quite objective and independent. A lot of times we have had issues of reporting or scrutinizing the company's account because maybe you are using your own internal auditors, and then they're subjected to conflict of interest. And sometimes maybe because of threats, then they end up not doing a good job. So independence is particularly important for non-executive directors and internal and external auditors. Remember to say that these people need to be very, very independent, the auditors, so that when they're giving their report, as I said, the report should be a report that is very independent. That's critical. Provide accurate and timely reporting of trustworthy, independent, financial, and operational data. Now, this is critical also, right? These reports have to be timely. In most companies, they have what we call the AGM, the annual general meeting, where all stakeholders, shareholders come in, and we shall see later, good corporate governance principle is the shareholders who appoint the directors, and then the director appoints the directors then appoint the general manager or the CEO of the company. And again, the shareholders can demand for the exit of a director. You see, they can also demand for the exit of the general manager or the CEO in the event that they feel that this particular person is not in line, is not, let's say, is not making the company profitable, or is not being ethical, you see, or they feel that is incompetent. I think that's the word I wanted to use. If they feel that the person is incompetent, then they can recommend for the general manager or even for directors to be released of their duties. So I think that's how powerful the shareholders can be. So it's good corporate governance will help us really promote that there is timely reporting and very independent financial and operational data is provided at the right time, As I said, most of these normally should be made public to the shareholders during, for example, the annual general meetings. Such should be undertaken. So that's critical. Now, some of the principles, again, as we go on, is encourage more proactive involvement of the owners, top members in the effective management of the organization, right? Through recognizing their responsibilities. So a good corporate governance principle also just tries to encourage more involvement, right? Proactive involvement of the owners and the members. It also directs behavior. So ensuring that boards take specific action which influence the amount of detailed requirements within the codes, right? I think that's also critical. And also authority and duties and members of the stakeholders are also very clear. The duties of members or shareholders is also very clear in good corporate governance principle. I've said shareholders here are key, and I've pointed out that shareholders will influence the election of the directors and also influence the appointment of the CEO. And if the shareholders have a feeling that, let's say, the CEO is incompetent, is not making the company profitable, or is involved in unethical conduct, then they can advise for the CEO to be removed or for any director to be removed. So basically, shareholders are very, 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 very powerful indeed. Right. So again, this is just a summary. And as I say, a lot of this you can still read them in the lecture notes that I gave. So some of the principles will rotate around leadership, ensure that there's good leadership for the organization, appointments to the board, who gets appointed to the board, what are the qualifications you're looking for, right? Remember I said there has to be gender balance in the appointment of the board. There has to be balance in terms of your technical competence. So we'll need people of diverse backgrounds in the board, maybe not just people of the same background. So depending on the organization, we might need maybe somebody with a finance background, somebody with a technical, maybe engineering background, or a law background. So it's good to have a wide composition of individuals from different backgrounds. Then the issue of strategy and values has also to be put in place, and then the structure. So this is basically a summary of the principles of good corporate governance. It focuses on ensuring that the right leadership is provided, focuses on ensuring that we follow the right principles in appointments to the board, and it focuses in ensuring that we have, yes, somebody is asking, do customer stakeholders? Yes, I said, I think Biru is asking that. Yes, customers, let me just answer that on the chat. Customers are stakeholders, as well. Yeah, so that's true. Customers are stakeholders, right? Anybody who in one way or another is has some link to that company is a stakeholder. You as an employee, you are a stakeholder. The owner of the company is a stakeholder. The suppliers are stakeholders. The customer is a stakeholder. You see? Anybody with a share in that company. So anybody who has some interest in a way in that company is a stakeholder. I think we shall see this later. The only difference, I think this differs from shareholders, right? So there's a stakeholder and a shareholder, you know, whereby we say shareholder has shares company. Yeah, so that's the difference. A shareholder is somebody who has bought maybe shares or is a principal partner in the business. Yeah, or is a principal partner. Is a principal partner. Yeah, so he has bought shares or is a principal partner in the business. I was just trying to answer to Biru's question where he was asking, he's put it on the chart, the rest can just look at it, where he was asking whether customers are stakeholders, right? And I've tried to explain and say, yes, customers are stakeholders. Anybody who has an interest in that company is a stakeholder. So I've just said the customer would be a stakeholder, the employee, you who is employed there will be a stakeholder, your employer is a stakeholder, your suppliers are stakeholders, and even your customers, your bankers are stakeholders, you know, all those people are stakeholders. So I think that's quite clear. And then generally trying to summarize the principles of good corporate governance. Now, again, it's important now as we move on to try to look at the responsibilities of the board of directors, you know, who are very crucial in running of the organization. Remember, the board of directors have an executive role. They have an executive role. But the day-to-day running of the company or the organization is by, in Ethiopia, I think you use the term general manager. In Kenya, we use the term CEO, Chief Executive Officer, which is the same as the general manager. Some other countries, maybe they call the president, the company president, you know. So I know you use the general manager. As here in Kenya, we use the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, and they mean the same thing. Now, these are the operational people, the day-to-day running of the company rests with the CEO, the general manager. But at the executive level, we have the board of directors who make decisions. The board of directors even make decisions on who should be the general manager. Then, after appointing the general manager then appoints the others, maybe the deputy general manager, appoints maybe the finance director, HR director, you know, all those people are appointed by the general manager. It's good practice that these people then can appoint their juniors, people who are maybe under finance, have the CEO maybe then making the appointment, or under HR, then you have the director of HR, things like that. Good. So please elaborate more on the independence of the executive officer. Right. Yes, I've seen a question from Bekal saying he wrote it privately. I think he should have put it to all. Let me just put it to all, everyone in meeting as answer. I want just to, so I've copied so that everybody can see. Yes, that's a question from Bekal. You can see it on the chart. He's saying, please elaborate more about the independence of executive officer. Right? Now, remember, that's a very good question. It's a very good question because I've said the board of directors, good principles of corporate governance, says that they are the ones who appoint the chief executive officer, the CEO. Same as what we call, I think, in your country. So here in Kenya, we talk of CEO, Chief Executive Officer, which I think is equivalent to the general manager in Ethiopia. General manager, So CEO, same as what you call the general manager. So the CEO is appointed by the board of directors, right? And as I said, many times good corporate governance principles will require that the board of directors are themselves appointed by the shareholders, right? Maybe like given a mandate for 3 years or 5 years, mostly 3 years. After that, then they can either be retained or in office, or a new board can be elected based on their performance, right? And then the board of directors then picks the CEO. And the CEO is given mandate to run the organization. Yeah? They have the independence to run the organization. However, the board of directors can come in when they're seeing their issues. Maybe the CEO is not running the organization the way they're expecting. If there are problems, for example, in our country here, we have had for a long, long time issues with our national flyer, Kenya Airways. You know, it's been reporting losses and losses, unlike your Ethiopian Airways, I think, which has been doing well even during COVID. I don't know how. Ours, I think, for March, there has been no operations because of COVID. Operations just started in August 1st, this month. But even so, as it started, the flights are still less than 50%. So you can see company is not doing well. I think they've had to lay off almost 1,500 workers, including pilots, some of them. Now, but the problem did not start with COVID. I think our national flyer just has had some problems in the last 5 years, not reporting profits and reporting losses and losses. And we've had to change the CEOs, executive officer, I think, not almost annually, you know, almost every year there's been a new one. Now, so many times, you know, the shareholders will feel that this particular CEO is not running the company well, is not running maybe KQ in the right way. And they would insist that maybe there's need for a new director, you know. However, as I said, the CEO, can they participate in annual management meeting without a willingness of general manager and executive management? Now, let me see this. Dekal says, please elaborate more about independence of executive office. Right? Can they participate in annual management meeting without a willingness, general manager and executive management? Yeah, there's a question there. I hope everyone is seeing. There's a question from Bekal, Kirubel, and Aymari. You can see that. I think anybody who is able can just try their hand and just put an answer there and see whether it makes sense. Bekal is trying to say, can the executive officers participate in annual management meeting without willingness of general manager and executive management? You mean the shareholders? Yes, the shareholders can have the right to participate.
Yeah.
Not management. Yeah.
The board always assign the board assigns the general manager and the president or vice presidents. Vice presidents. After that, they make an annual management meeting with those all followers. Then the board directors always want to participate in that meeting without the president's willingness. That's my question. Is that really convenient for their work and relationship? Is that breaking the independence of the general manager and the board? I think this is my question.
Yeah. That's very, very good. Ayele, can you try to assist in that answer? Alemayu.
ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በምዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Basically, this question will be answered by the board charter. You know, in some organizations, the board has their own charter, and that is why governance is required. What is the responsibility of the board, and what is the responsibility of the management? If it is defined clearly, the Baakal's question will be answered by that. In organizations that doesn't have a governance manual and doesn't have a board charter, they can participate anywhere because it depends on their goodwill. This is what I understand.
Yeah.
You heard me?
Yeah, I accept that. I accept that. Can they participate in annual management meeting without a willingness of the general manager and the executive?
No, what is the willingness of the general manager? It depends on the board manual or the governance manual, code of conduct.
Good. So I think, yeah, I'm getting it from Alemayu's answer that the key issue here is that do you have either the governance manual or what does your management manual says? But let me get it from Bekal. You mean the shareholders participating, or you mean the executive officer? When you say can they participate, you mean the executive officer or you mean the shareholders?
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Bakal.
When you talk of can they participate, you are talking of who?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you are asking can they participate, whom are you referring to? The executive officer or the shareholders?
Board.
For example, in our bank, there is a president and vice president.
Yeah.
They always make a meeting with the boards, the board directors. But within an annual basis, all branch managers and directors collecting together and make an annual meeting. At that time, the board wants to get in the annual meeting, but the presidents do not want to participate them. That might be related with independence.
I think, yes.
Can you elaborate with that? Yeah.
You know, it depends,
Let me ask some question for Bakal, doctor.
Yeah.
Bakal.
Yes, just ask.
Yes.
Bakal.
Yes.
Do your bank have a governance manual?
Yeah.
Is there a manual?
Yeah.
Or do you have a board charter?
We have got a manual, corporate governance manual.
So I'm trying to get it. I've just sent. what Alimai is saying. He's saying, or Kirubel says, I think it depends on the type of meeting and the nature of the organization. That's right. And then I think what Ayele was saying, that the governance manual outlines the responsibility of the board. So, but I also go by what Kirubel says. I think it depends on the type of meeting and the nature of the organization, right? I think that those are really crucial. Going by even what I'm gathering from Ayele, your governance manual and your management manual outlines the responsibility of. Now, let me go back to Beckel's questions and then see the answers that have been put there on the chart. He says that the president and the vice president who normally meets the board of directors. That's okay. And then he's saying when they have a meeting, and that's where now Kirubel's answer comes in. So now you have the president and the vice president having a meeting with the branch managers, and they keep off the board of directors. I think it will depend. First of all, going by Kirubel's answer, what type of meeting is it? Maybe it's a meeting about the internal working of the organization, which they don't want the board to be. You see, the body, the board of directors has a responsibility over I don't know how it is in your place, but here, the president or the general manager or the CEO is the secretary to the board of directors. When the board of directors have a meeting, it is the president or the CEO or the general manager who takes the minutes. So in that kind of meeting, you see that's now a board meeting where he's participating. He is allowed to participate and of course take the minutes. You know, he's a secretary to the board as it is. I don't know, you'll tell me how it is in Ethiopia. So that's why I'm trying to accept Kirubel's answer that it depends on the nature of the meeting. If this is a meeting for housekeeping, for the normal management issues, then the board of directors don't need to be part of this. Unless now it is a wider meeting, let's say an AGM, then where the board of directors are part of it and they're shareholders. But I think I go by the two answers, one by Ayele. The responsibility of the board is outlined in the governance manual and the meetings they are to participate and where they are not to participate. And number two, what type of meeting are we talking about? You see, there are meetings where you don't need them. Maybe the CEO or the president wants a meeting with the people he's controlling, with the branch managers, to discuss matters within the organization. I don't think at that point the board of directors need to join that meeting. I don't think so. They don't need to. So that's the issue. I don't know if you could help me answer out. In Ethiopia also, does the president or the CEO, is he the secretary to the board? Becca, does that happen like that in Ethiopia as well?
Yes, yes.
Kirubel, it happens the same also. Yeah. So I think the answer I would give you is a mix of Alemayu's answer and Beckel's answer. One, it depends on the nature of the meeting, right? And number two, if you have a governance manual, it will be very clear which kind of meetings the board of directors can participate and which ones they cannot participate in. So first of all, we'll want to know what's the nature of this meeting. Maybe it's a meeting that requires their presence, but that should be outlined in the governance manual. But most of the time, I know meetings that involve, these are operational meetings, and I don't see why the board of governors would want to be involved. So it will be good. I believe, for me, I see it's good practice to keep them off meetings that are about operations of the organization, you know. So that really gives the president autonomy to be able to make decisions at that level without the influence of the board. Basically, that's not their meeting. The day-to-day running of the company or the organization is left to the president or the general manager or the CEO. And at that level, at such meeting, those are his meetings. And those are not meetings where the board of directors should come in. So I really support the fact that they keep them off such meetings. I think it's a good practice to uphold their independence, right? So, so I think yes, I agree with the two answers of Bekal and Alemayu. Good. So I think generally, as we look at the responsibility of the board of directors, this could be the general feel, but possibly then maybe as we go on with our classes, I would advise you maybe to look at the various boards of the organizations that you work for, so that we just maybe, I think at some level, maybe I'll give an assignment that will relate to you maybe reviewing your governance manual, and then maybe we find out what are the differences that we have. But I think before the next class, I'll have thought about that. Maybe that can be one of the assignments. Right. So, so we are saying that the board should monitor and evaluate the implementation of strategies, policies, and management performance. And so you can see, that's why I'm agreeing with the fact that a meeting between the president and the branch managers really does not call for the presence of the board of directors, right? In addition, the board should constantly review the viability and financial sustainability of enterprises and must do so at least once every year. This is very critical, so that when they look at the accounting reports on the financial accounts or positions of the organization, they should also be able to review the financial standing of the organization, right? They look at things like corporate compliance, you know. The board should ensure that the corporation complies with all the relevant laws, regulations, government practices, accounting and auditing standards. And that's why I told you that we also, when we are selecting the board of directors, we need to be careful to select people who can add value, you know. We don't just want to pick anybody to fill up the place, but it's important that we pick people who maybe have outstanding performance in, let's say, the private sector or the public sector, and have good grasp of either technical or financial issues. And when we bring them to the board, then they can contribute to the board, right? So that it's not just a question of filling up positions and maybe people just getting allowances. No. So corporate communication also critical. The board should ensure that the corporate communication with all. So I think that's just trying to ensure that there's good corporate communication. I think it's also one of the issues. Number 5, accountability to members. Again, we are saying the board should serve the legitimate interest of all members and account to them fully, you know. So it's not just about themselves, but they're there. Remember, I said good corporate governance principles. The board is chosen by the shareholders. It's the shareholders who choose the board, and that's why they have to be accountable to the members. The members who can recommend they're being dropped or they're being retained, you know. Responsibility to stakeholders. You see, they have also a responsibility to the stakeholders. That includes the members and everybody else, right? And balance of power. The board should ensure that no one person or group of persons has unfettered powers, and there is an appropriate balance of power on the board so that it can exercise objective and independent judgment. Now, this is a bit difficult. You see sometimes, so it's not good if you're in the board and maybe, let's say this is a private company, or even if it's public, but one person has, let's say, majority of shares, over 50%. when this person has the majority of shares, then it means there is no balance of power on that board. And such people tend then to sway the discussion, They tend to, they can influence, that's the word I wanted to use. They can influence decisions based on the fact that they have a majority shareholding. So there should be balance of power. That's one thing that is also recommended. Internal control procedures. Again, the board should regularly review systems, processes, and procedures to ensure the effectiveness of the internal systems of control so that its decision-making capability and accuracy of its reporting and financial results are maintained, right? So, and that's why when there are problems, then we ask we ask for the competence, the word is competence of the board of directors, Some of the companies that are fallen, where we realize that maybe the company was reporting false financial statements, giving the impression that maybe the company is profitable when it's not profitable, then it collapses, maybe with shareholders' money. You see, who is responsible accountable? The first people to go in that case is the board of directors, because they should have seen that and should have reported that. So that's basically incompetence on their part. So these are some of the things. Assessment of performance of the board of directors. Now, the board of directors regularly assesses its and effectiveness as a whole, and that of individual members, including the CEO. And I said this one, here in Kenya, we call them CEO, but I know, we can use president, or we can use general manager. I think it means this means similar things with us. So I think it's important to put that in place. Yeah. A summary of the major findings together with a statement confirming that the board has carried out a self-assessment should be made to the annual general meeting. I think this is also a very clear, very critical responsibility of the board, right? To ensure that, so that to assess their performance and even assess the performance of the top of the president or the general manager or of the CEO. Remember, this goes back to the fact, what we say, that the board is the one that, in good corporate governance practice, is supposed to elect the president, right? The president is accountable to the board of directors or the general manager or the executive officer. And that's why, if in the assessment the board of directors feel the president is not performing well, or the GM or the CEO, then they can recommend for his removal, right? I've just given you the example of our KQ, which has had almost, 5 or so officers being removed because they feel that they're not doing enough to turn around the company to make profits. And even as we are with another general manager or CEO, but I think the problems of maybe this company are much deeper than it is. I don't know how. I think most aviation industries in Africa are not doing well. I just don't know what's the secret of Ethiopian airline. Yeah, Kirubel. What's the secret? What's the secret of Ethiopian Airlines?
The secret of Ethiopian Airlines is the continuity of CEO for the last CEO for the last 10 years. Yeah,
10 years.
We didn't change the CEO for the last 10 years. Thank you.
Okay. But even yeah, there must be, apart from that, I think there must be other things that make it so strong in Africa that maybe other airlines need to copy. One of the fact that it's state controlled, is that not so? I was just trying to explain this point of assessment of the performance of the board of directors and the CEO, and the fact that I was just giving an example of our situation here, where in our airline, the board has often recommended for the removal of the CEO on the basis of poor performance. But sometimes that poor performance is beyond the CEO. Like I was just giving the example of our case here. I think the poor performance of our institution, like the Kenya Airways, is actually beyond the CEO. Maybe needs to be put up. For this class, I would want one of the assignment will be for you to review the corporate governance structures, corporate governance manual in your organization, and maybe recommend, based now on your understanding of, I think, given that now I've even given you the lecture material and such, and even from your own reading and your many years of work experience, if you can review that and give recommendations. So you'll give 2 forms of recommendations, where you think it is very strong and where you think it's very weak. I'll draft that, and I think that will be part of our assignment. Remember, we have 40% for the main exam, and we have 60%. So in this 60%, I think I'll try to give 2 assignments. Maybe one is that one, I'll draft it, maybe 30, and another one 30. So I might give 2. I don't know whether you'll be required to do a mid-semester exam. I'll find out. So what I'll do is we'll have a quiz, and then you'll have either 1 or 2 assignments, but one I've already identified. So let's continue and look at the implementing corporate governance. You see, this is very, very critical. The 5 of us here, Biru, Alemayu, Bekal, and who was the other one? We're 5 here. Alemayu, Bekal, Kirubel. Yeah, Kirubel. Yeah, I think.
And Bishop.
Yeah, Bishop. I guess you're working in organizations that have corporate governance manual. So if you don't have, then this is your opportunity to see. If you have, is okay, because what we'll do is that we'll try to review that and give 2 recommendations, where it is strongest and where it is weakest. But if you don't have, then this is an opportunity for you to develop one, right? And possibly even after this, then you can be a consultant on corporate governance and maybe help other organizations that do not have the right structures to help them achieve the right structures. So that's why it's important that we look at how do you implement corporate governance, right? So number 1 is induction, development, and strengthening skills of the board members, right? So maybe training of the board members so that their skills on what is expected of them and their responsibilities is highlighted. Appointment and development of executive management, adoption of technology and skills, also very critical. Management of corporate risks is also a critical undertaking. Corporation social and environmental responsibility also has to be put in place. Remember, issues of corporate social responsibility and issues to do with the environment have to be put in place in your corporate governance structures. Recognition and utilization of professional skills and competencies. Again, this is critical. Remember, as I said, what is important in organization is people. People, not even technology. Yes, technology is critical, but when I'm sure you have gone through classes like change management, right? Leading change and in organization. And normally the perception is that what causes failure is technology and infrastructure. That's the perception. But the reality is failure is caused by people. Because even if you have the best advanced infrastructure, very good corporate governance principles and manuals, and you have the best in terms of technology, but if you're not invested in the people who are going to manage these structures, then I don't think you're going anywhere. Because all this, whether you have the best of technology or you have the best of structure, you still need people to be able to align your strategy with structures, to be able to align your strategy to technology. So you see, that's why then the people becomes very critical. So that point, number second last, is important. Recognition and utilization of professional skills and competencies, recognition and protection of members' rights and obligations. Again, it's important in good corporate governance principle for members to know what's their rights, right? Earlier on, we said they have a responsibility to appoint the board of directors, who have a responsibility to appoint the president or the general manager or the CEO. The CEO then has the responsibility to organize his team, and things like that. So those are critical things when you're talking about good corporate governance. So I talked about that responsibility. Then the other one, the attention of the board of directors is increasingly being drawn to the need to ensure that, number one, the governance framework takes account of gender and children's rights. Now, this is, I think Ethiopia is leading in Africa, and Rwanda. I think Rwanda is the leading so far, ensuring that there are more ladies in the boards. Usually in Kenya here, it's also, they talk of at least half or more, at least 3/4. But you see, it's sometimes difficult because you can't, I think over the years, there has been not many ladies at the top level. So again, getting enough appointed in these positions is a problem. But I think, if I'm not wrong, maybe you guys can tell me, Rwanda and Ethiopia could be some of the examples in terms of achieving this gender balance, right? The corporation promotes the interest and rights and welfare of the host communities. I think this is also critical. The corporation protects and preserves the environment. This is also very important. Protection. What we mean is that, you see, sometimes if you are maybe a brewing farm and maybe the company is located in another community, right? So ensure that their interests, rights, and welfare are preserved. You don't go there and destroy the environment. You don't go there and destroy their roads. So you uphold, ensure you put up roads, ensure their social welfare, like schools have been built, hospitals, so that the corporation is seen to be contributing positively to the host community where it is. Yeah. So these are important corporate governance principles that really should be adhered to. The last one is very important. Cooperation protects and preserves the environment. Think about the environment as they try to implement. So finally, we may want to look at the benefits of improved corporate governance, right? And I think this is important because this is the reason why we want to achieve good corporate governance. That's the reason. Can we change today's class to weekdays? Sounds Tuesday or Wednesday. Okay, I think we'll look at it. I've seen Wednesdays. I'll see. I will see when which date is good, when I have time. Let's see. Okay. Free. Communicate. Right. So I'll see when I have I'm free in my schedule and communicate. Meanwhile, let's just finish today's lecture by looking at the benefits of improved corporate governance. So number one, I say investors and shareholders, corporate governance provides protection from abuse and any likely reduction in shareholder value. So investors and shareholders are very critical in this, right? I know for the Ethiopian situation, if somebody, okay, you can look at investors. If somebody is to invest, let's say in an existing company, I think the rule is that the local has 60% and the foreign 40%. Am I right, Biru? Is that right?
The percentage in what decision making or what? Percentage in what case? In partnerships?
Investment. Let's say yes, investment in terms of, let's say we are starting up a company. So there's a local and a foreign investor.
It's not fixed actually. As far as I know, it's not fixed. It might be vary depending upon their capital they invested. It depends upon the amount of capital they invested. But the one who has more investment has the power to decide in any points of decision requests, you know.
But the foreign component should not be less than $100,000. The foreign component should not be less than $100,000. This is the investment
should
law.
Not be, yeah, should not be less than $100,000.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think that there are rules. There are rules. So yeah. So, but what I was trying to see that investor who is coming from out, before they put their investment in the existing company in Ethiopia, often they are interested in things like, do they have structures, especially corporate governance, because that is what can give them confidence that the money is safe and that the company is protected, has integrity, and is protected from abuse of office. Again, number two, for companies, good corporate governance practices should provide improved access to finance. Many times, if the company wants to borrow money, either locally or from outside, one of the things that the lender would request is a corporate governance manual, just to know, to show that this company is not, let's say, an individual's property, and you're giving money to money which will not be well accounted for, right? So corporate governance and investor protection are crucial for capital markets. I think that goes without saying. The other benefits, regulators and supervisors, corporate governance act as a first line of prudential defense and increases financial stability, right? For regulators and supervisors, you can see that. Again, corporate governance is key component of the governance and anti-corruption agenda. You know, it's just one of the ways of ensuring that you are protecting the company from fraud and corruption, because there are all these layers of responsibility, all these layers of correct accounting and reporting and being open. You know, for the economy as a whole, improved corporate governance practices should result in more sustained economic growth, you see. So companies that are not collapsing, that are sustainable, that are profitable, that are employing more people, and that are remitting their taxes, you know, are because once the accounting standards are clear and reporting is clear, then the company is not going, you know, there's a lot of instances we've had where maybe companies report low profit, so that they have like two books where they report the real profit and where they report the fake profit, so that it is low, and that reduces maybe the tax that they're remitting to the government. But with good corporate governance principle, everything is clear, is put on the table, and the company is able to remit the correct tax level, and that is good for the general development of the company. Other benefits: improved corporate governance increases firm share prices, hence better government farm. Better governed farms appear to enjoy lower cost of capital. Operational performance is higher in better corporate governance country. Well-governed companies have less volatile stock prices in times of crisis. Again, this is very important. I don't know the operations of the Ethiopian Stock Exchange. I'm sure some of your companies are listed in the Ethiopian Stock Exchange. So for company listed in the stock exchange, it's paramount, first of all, that they have a good governance structure. So that, again, that is a way of ensuring that there's stability, right? So that's why we are saying in that point number 3, well-governed companies have less volatile stock prices in times of crisis. So that stability ensures that even when there is a crisis, the share prices remain stable, right? Companies with boards composed of a fraction of outsiders or independent directors usually have a higher market value. Again, the independence of the board is very critical in showing that the company has integrity. Improvements in corporate governance quality leads to higher GDP growth. I think I've said that, in terms of companies being stable, reporting more profit, and being able to contribute more in terms of taxes to the government. When a country's overall corporate governance and property rights systems are weak, voluntary and market corporate governance mechanisms are muted. So again, you need the overall corporate governance in the entire country to be very strong. And of course, this has to be supported by the law. Remember the slide number 2 when I asked you, in your country, do you have corporate governance principles? What happens? There was a question there. What happens if there's violation? That's very important. The law has got to be seen to so it's not just enough to have laws in place, but then it has to be seen to act. So we have to see general managers, presidents, or CEOs violating corporate governance principles, going to jail and being jailed for that. Yeah. Right now, we have a case in this country of some of the CEOs of big corporates in this country, even just as late as the last 4 months of handling the COVID money, government agencies which were responsible for doing procurement on behalf of the government. And now it's realized that maybe there is poor accountability of how this money was used. There's poor accountability of where the PPEs and the masks and these ventilators were sourced from. All these are coming into play. And that basically would mean that it's exposing the organizations as a result of poor governance structures. So that's why it's important that the government comes in. And I was saying it's not just about having these manuals on paper, but they have to be enforced. The law has to be seen to act where there's been an infringement on corporate governance. And basically, such CEOs or such general manager should be jailed. That's the only way to ensure that the rest are able to learn a lesson and we are able to have good practices in place. Now, other benefits: large, more concentrated ownership can be beneficial or useless unless there is disparity of control and cash rights. Again, we need more controls. The quality of shareholder protection positively correlate to the development of countries' capital markets, right? So shareholders really need to be protected. Better corporate governance leads to better developed financial systems. Remember, I talked about this in terms of adhering to the right accounting standards and things like that. So as a final thought, the key elements of good corporate governance is number one, independence of directors, separation of strategic planner role from operational role. And remember, that's why it goes back to the questions of Kirubel or of Beckel, why the president would not want the board of directors to sit in his meeting where he's discussing with the branch managers. There has to be that separation. An exit strategy for company owners. There has to be an exit strategy. If you're the owner of the company, maybe you have come into a partnership or a collaboration. How do you exist? Reliable systems and procedures. Again, I think I mentioned that as a summary. Key performance indicators, again, must be there. We say constantly the board has to assess their performance. And apart from that, the performance of the president or the CEO, remuneration and HR policies must also be very clear, right? Promotion criteria must be very clear so that things are not seen to be are open, right? And not like you're hiding anything. The role of the stakeholders and who are the stakeholders should also be made very clear as it is. I think that ends my lecture for today. It's 4:04. I think what will happen, still I have activity 1 to go through. Is it activity 1 and 2? Here have activity 1 and 2. There is a lecture 1 and 2 where we still have activity 1 and 2, and then there is lecture 2 and 3 today, which I still have activity 1 and 2. There's activity 1 here, which I just want you to take your own time, go through it with the study manual that I gave, and then on Friday, I'll rush through the activity 1 and 2 for lecture 1 and 2, and then activity 1 and 2 for this lecture 2 and 3, right? So maybe just is like a revision. What tools of government, institutional investors have at their disposal? Discuss giving relevant examples. So please go through this. What evidence is there to show that good, and give maybe examples from Ethiopia? Institutional investors have a responsibility to vote the shares in their investee companies. Critically discuss this. Discuss with justification any 4 drivers of corporate governance. What are the key benefits of improved corporate governance? And finally, discuss the key elements of corporate governance. So let's look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So we normally just so that we are normally 5. So for the activities, I think we are normally 5. So let me just so that question 1 for all of them. The other one we can discuss all of that. We'll go to Bekal for both lecture 1 and 2 and lecture 2 and 3. And then question 2 will always be taken by Biru. So lecture 1 and 2 and lecture 3 and 4. Question 3 will be taken by Ayele. So look at both lecture 1 and 2 and lecture 3 and 4. Question 4, whom have I not included? Bekal, Biru, Ayele. We are about 5. Do you know the names of the others so that
Kirubel and Bishau.
Kirubel and Bishau.
Yeah.
Kirubel Balleta.
Kirubel. Yeah,
Sorry,
Kirubel takes Kirubel takes question 4, and then Vishal, yeah, is it?
Yeah, Vishal.
Vishal takes question 5. Yeah. So question 6, we can discuss all of us. So for the activities, you see, there's activity for lecture 1 and 2. So yes, and then this one is lecture 3 and 4. So Bekal will look at the question 1 in both of them. Biru will look at question 2 in the 2 lectures. Ayele will look at question 3. Kirubel will look at question 4. Vishal will look at question 5. If there's any extra, then that one maybe I will discuss.
mine is question 2, sorry.
Just to involve you so that yours is Biru is question 2.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that I involve you, so that on Friday, that's what I'll start with. And then I'm also just advising that we look at, just read through. You have them already. You can, already there was case 1, which I've given for you to read on, I can't remember the company. And then there's case 2 now, and case 3. I think those are the ones that I would want. So you have case study number 1, 2, and 3. You can just read through, and those are the things that we'll spend time discussing on Friday before I move on to lecture what? Lecture 5 and 6. But by tomorrow, I'll also send you lecture 7 and 8, and then I'll also send you the first term assignment, sort of. I've already just explained that I want you to look at the governance manual in your organization, or any that you can find, and you review it, and then make recommendations on what you think are the strong points and what you think are the weak points. Good. So I think, as you have suggested here on the chat, I will see when the slot that I can put in place and then communicate, right? But yes, but as it is, we still have our meeting on Friday. This Friday I had some issues, and that's why I sent a mail. I think maybe Mayu did not see his mail. I sent a mail when I was sending lectures 5 and 6, and I told you I may not be in with you, but I requested you to read case studies number 1, 2, and 3. So I think if you don't, Biru, I saw your email. I will respond by tomorrow with regard to your term paper. No, with regard to your dissertation. And but maybe you can just start chapter 2, but I'll give you feedback tomorrow.
Okay.
I think Ayele had already given you feedback, and I told you to maybe just continue with chapter 2. Yes, the other one is not here. She is called Birham, something like that. Okay. So I think that's okay. We can end the lecture today unless somebody has a question. Any question? Yeah, thank you. So see you on Friday to discuss the activity and the case studies. All right.
Thank you.
So thank you.